Texas, May 19, 1836. Fort Parker. The morning begins like any other, quiet and routine, until everything changes in an instant. A young girl stands frozen as violence erupts around her. Her family is attacked without warning. She watches loved ones fall one by one, unable to move, unable to process what is happening. Before she can scream, she is taken. She is only 17 years old, 6 months pregnant, and completely powerless. Her name is Rachel Plummer, and what she is about to endure will stay with her for the rest of her life. Years later, when she finally returns to safety, Rachel attempts to write about her experience. But even then, she cannot bring herself to tell everything. She admits that describing the full truth would only deepen her suffering. So she leaves parts of her story unwritten. That silence becomes one of the most powerful parts of her story. Because sometimes what is not said carries more weight than anything that is. Rachel was not alone. Throughout the 1800s, across the American frontier, hundreds of women and children were taken during sudden raids. Some were eventually returned after long negotiations. A few managed to escape against impossible odds, but many disappeared completely, their stories never recorded. And those who did return often struggled to explain what they had lived through, even to their own families. These were not legends or exaggerated tales. They were real events, recorded in memoirs, official reports, and eyewitness testimonies. They reveal a side of history that is often ignored. The frontier was not just a place of exploration and opportunity. It was also a place of fear, violence, and survival. The raids themselves followed a pattern. They often came at dawn or dusk, when visibility was low and families were least prepared. Isolated homes were the easiest targets, far from any help. There were no warnings, no negotiations. The attacks were fast and deliberate. Men were usually killed within moments, leaving the rest defenseless. After the initial violence came a cold and calculated process. Survivors were chosen based on their usefulness. Women who could work or bear children were taken. Young girls were also captured, as they could be raised within the tribe and eventually forget their past lives. The elderly and infants were often left behind or killed, seen as unable to survive the journey ahead. It was a system driven by survival, harsh and unforgiving. One of the most well-known survivors was Olive Oatman. She was only 14 when her family was attacked in 1851 near the Gila River. Within minutes, everything she knew was gone. Only she and her younger sister remained alive. They were forced into the desert, beginning a journey that would test every limit of human endurance. Olive later described walking through the night, over sharp rocks that cut into her feet, through cactus that tore at her skin. She had no food, no water, and no rest. Every time she slowed down, she was forced forward. Her younger sister walked beside her, equally exhausted and terrified. By the time the sun rose, their bodies were already breaking. But stopping was not an option. Stopping meant death. When captives finally reached the camp, their new lives began immediately. There was no time to recover from injuries or shock. They were put to work from the very first day. Tasks were constant and exhausting. They carried water for long distances under the heat of the sun. They gathered firewood until their hands were raw. They performed the hardest and most unwanted labor. Food was scarce. They ate only after everyone else had finished, taking whatever scraps were left behind. Some days, there was nothing at all. Hunger became a constant companion. Sleep offered little relief, as they were often woken before dawn to begin another day of labor. Punishment was unpredictable. It could come for working too slowly, for showing exhaustion, or sometimes for no clear reason at all. Living in constant fear became part of daily life. Rachel Plummer later described her captivity as a time filled with dread and suffering, where even the smallest mistake could lead to pain. Olive and her sister endured this for months, but her younger sister, still just a child, could not survive the conditions. Slowly, she grew weaker. Olive watched helplessly as the life faded from her. Losing her sister in such a way left a wound that never fully healed. Another heartbreaking case is that of Matilda Lockhart. She was captured at just 13 years old and spent 2 years in captivity. When she was finally returned, those who saw her were shocked into silence. Her injuries told a story of prolonged suffering that went far beyond words. She tried to explain what had happened, but even her account could not fully capture the reality. The physical damage was only part of it. The emotional and psychological impact stayed with her long after her release. She never truly recovered and died at a very young age. Captives were also subjected to rituals designed to break them mentally and physically. One of these was known as running the gauntlet. The captive was forced to run between two lines of people, each one striking them as they passed. It was painful, humiliating, and meant to establish control from the very beginning. Those who managed to endure it, without breaking, sometimes earned a small degree of respect. Those who showed weakness often faced even harsher treatment. Rachel herself went through this multiple times. Over time, she learned that showing pain only made things worse. She adapted in whatever way she could because survival depended on it. Some captives experienced a different path. Instead of constant labor, they were taken as wives. This did not mean freedom or choice, but it sometimes meant slightly better living conditions. These women were expected to fully take on their new roles, whether they wanted to or not. A powerful and complex example is Cynthia Ann Parker. She was taken as a young child during the same raid as Rachel Plummer. Unlike others, she spent decades living within the tribe. Over time, she learned the language, adopted the customs, and built a life there. She married, had children, and became part of that world. When she was eventually found and taken back, it did not feel like a rescue. She had already formed deep connections and a sense of belonging. Being forced to leave that behind caused immense emotional pain. She spent the rest of her life longing for the family she had lost a second time. Children often suffered the most. Families were torn apart during raids, and many were never reunited. Rachel herself experienced this loss. Her young son was taken from her, and she did not see him again for years. During her captivity, she gave birth to another child, but that child did not survive. The loss stayed with her forever. Even when captives were returned, the years of separation had changed them. Some no longer remembered their original families. Others struggled to reconnect, feeling like strangers in their own homes. The emotional distance was often just as painful as the physical suffering they had endured. When Olive Oatman was finally released after years of captivity, she faced a different kind of challenge. Returning to her old life was not easy. She had adapted to a completely different world. Even speaking her original language felt unfamiliar. The marks she carried were not only emotional, but also physical. Her appearance had changed in ways that could not be hidden. These marks became a constant reminder of her past, something she could never fully leave behind. By the late 1800s, the line between settlers and native tribes had become more complex than people often realized. Many individuals had mixed backgrounds, and identities were no longer simple or clear. Some captives fully adapted and chose to remain where they were. Others returned but never truly felt at home again. The frontier was not a simple story of good versus bad. It was a harsh environment where survival often came at a high cost. People on all sides faced difficult choices and lived with the consequences. Many of those who survived carried their experiences in silence. They struggled to explain what they had gone through, even to those closest to them. Some memories were simply too painful to put into words. Rachel Plummer herself admitted that certain parts of her experience would remain untold. That silence is an important part of history. It reminds us that not everything can be fully understood or explained. These women were victims of circumstances beyond their control, but they were also survivors. They endured unimaginable hardship and lived to tell their stories, even if only partially. Their experiences challenge the way we think about history. They show us a reality that is often overlooked. It's one that is far more complicated and difficult than the stories we are used to hearing. Remembering them is important, not just as victims, but as individuals who showed incredible strength in the face of overwhelming adversity. Their stories deserve to be heard, not because they are easy to listen to, but because they are real. In the end, The frontier was not just a place of opportunity. It was a place where lives were changed forever, where survival came at a cost, and where the line between loss and endurance was often very thin. These stories remind us of that truth and of the people who lived through it.